Last time you talked, there was some little echo.
Interesting. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Securities for Developers roundtable, I would guess, or panel. I mean, usually we all know those panels where people are sitting next to each other or in a crowd, but here it's all virtual. But still, I think we'll get some great fun out of it. My name is Christian, and I started doing web, I think, in 1996 or so. Haven't looked back since. Among other things, I support companies and developers in all things web application security, and I'm super excited to be part of this illustrious panel with a lot of other experts from different areas. And before everyone introduces themselves, I would just recommend that you, the attendees, you can ask questions in the chat or in the Q&A section. Things that are of interest for you, things you would like us to discuss, things you would like to contribute to this discussion, and we would appreciate that very much. Otherwise, we just talk about those things we pick, and it might be more fun if you pick the topics. So please feel free to do that. And what we are interested in while everyone's introducing themselves is what you are doing. So are you say a developer, or are you an architect, or are you managing? So if you want, please use the chat and just write a one-word description of what you do. Could be also fun, as long as it's appropriate. So please go ahead. And with that, I would like to ask the other panelists to introduce themselves. And I would say ladies first. So Darija, would you kindly start?
Thank you. Hi, nice audience and other nice speakers. My name is Darija. I'm UX and service design expert, and also Java team lead in Experis Cyber in Norway, Oslo. Yes, so I'm very happy that we can discuss security, since it's been on agenda mainly lately. At least in our company, we established the whole department for that, and coursing everybody inside of the organization with the importance of security. I was organizing the courses and took a couple of certifications myself with a big excitement and interest. And I really hope that if you are not so into this topic, that you will be a bit more inspired to do that, and also that if you are already, you will get some new interesting insights during our panel session. And please participate actively. Thank you.
Excellent. What were you talking about yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday I was talking about UX toolkit for developers and other good people, helping you to learn how to validate the solutions with real users, ideate using Scamper method, and get other useful insight for your solution, both understanding what's the need behind it and like what's the best solution for that solving that need.
Oh, that's actually some information I would need if I look at the UIs I do. And I think you all know that the recordings of the sessions will be made available later. So make sure to check out Darija's session. I would continue with Philippe, because Brian needs a break after the keynote, so he can rest his voice for a minute.
All right. I'm Philippe De Ryck. I'm from Belgium. I used to travel all over the world to help companies understand security better and build more secure applications. And since about a year and a couple of months, I'm stuck at home, which has pros, but also some cons. So we'll leave that in the middle. I'm a security expert. So I've been doing security for basically most of my life. I did a PhD in web security and continued from there with teaching security to developers and helping them figure out complex topics like OAuth and OpenID Connect, things like that. So yeah, happy to be here, and I hope there's going to be some interesting questions to discuss.
Excellent. So thanks a lot. And yesterday you were talking about?
I talked about API authentication. So we went over a couple of
all the different
options and what you could do, and the pros and the cons and the trade-offs and all of that.
Excellent. Super important topic, especially for single-page apps, I guess, because that's not so easy. Well,
yeah, well,
if you know how it is, but still. So I think it's also a must-see session when you get access to the recordings, if you haven't been there anyway. So last but not least, Brian, fresh from keynoting today.
Yeah. I just finished my keynote and jumped straight on this panel, and Great to be here together with all of you folks. I am Brian Vermeer. I'm based in the Netherlands, Breda, which is actually not that close from the Belgian border. I think it's about 10 minutes. Then I'm in Belgium. But I'm a Java champion, Java developer first and foremost, and I work for a company called Sneak, where we create security tooling for developers. And currently, I am basically deep diving in Java security research, like how can we help developers create more secure code and more secure applications in that meaning. So yeah, that is what my current job is. And just like Philippe, I was traveling all over the world doing these talks on conferences, and now I'm doing these talks on conferences all over the world from my own office or whatever it is. So I hope we will get back to a real panel where we actually sit next to each other and have these questions. Hopefully, say early next year. I'm confident that we can do that again. But for now, I think this is quite awesome. I love this how the folks did this and how it all looks. So yeah.
The platform is also pretty stable, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
The experience is pretty well, and I mean, I find it generally amazing, you know, how quickly, especially organizers, could cope with the situation and then, you know, set up things and that really work. Recently at a conference, there even was an informal a gathering. You know, the hallway track is probably the most important track of many conferences, where you just meet people and talk to them. And so what they did is they had a platform, and you had little avatars which you could, you know, steer with your cursor. And I thought, okay, a game. No, let's not do it. But the thing is, you know, when you approached other people, so you saw all attendees in a room, and when you approached them, you saw their videos and you could chime in on their conversations, just like the real thing. And, you know, after a minute, I was so hooked that, you know, I had a good evening with all my conference friends, right? But still, it's unusual, yeah. Darija, please.
Yeah, just a comment. So in case you haven't discovered the chat, just like I didn't discover it when I was keeping my talk, like halfway into the talk, I thought, okay, is there anybody there? So if you go to the right side, there is this chat panel with the like running questions and stuff. Yeah. And there is like kind of toggle with public and other things, at least for the speakers. So yeah, then you see the actual what people write.
Exactly. So Darija has also just written into the chat, and the others as well. So if you want, just chime in there. But that being said, before we commence, Brian, I did miss your keynote because I was also in your room. I'm terribly sorry. But before I get the recording, what was the keynote about? What did we miss?
Yeah, the keynote was about the consciousness of creating your application, and think about not only your code but also what you pull in, like your frameworks and dependencies. What can happen if you, for instance, use outdated dependencies, because that's what we see a lot in different companies. Once it's in, never gets out. And we actually did some. We created a bunch of hacks around that. Like we recreated the old-fashioned or the classic struts hack that targeted Equifax in 2017. Like what did it actually do, and why is it not so much the programmer's fault? Or is it? And that's the question. And that was the question that was bouncing all around during that keynote, that we need to take care of that part of your application just as much as you take good pride of code reviews and optimizing everything. But blindly pulling in dependencies is not always a good thing, or at least keep track of them.
It is a challenge. I mean, what was the name of that NPM module that was retracted by its author? I think strpad or pad left or something like that. So it kind of code that was prepending space characters to a string. But since you never should repeat yourself, right? So everyone had to rely on that package. The package was gone. So you automatically updated all of your dependencies, which in theory is a good thing, right? But in practice, just broke the applications.
Well, that is the thing. Like what you pull in yourself, which is one thing, but the transitive ones. And if there is dependency pollution, for instance, because somebody overrode a dependency because, hey, with social engineering, for some reason, I gave away my key to publish it. And somebody republishes a new version of that package, and everybody else includes that, and then you get a snowball effect. So it means that we have to be careful, not only what we directly include, but also what we implicitly use.
Okay. Yeah, that's it's super important yet super hard, right? I just if I may tell the story, I was just working with a customer because they get an ISO audit, right? So they want to pass ISO certification, and so they pulled me in for preparing them at least the web app sec part, right? And I mean one of the prerequisites, so to speak, is that all of your dependencies are up to date, right? But exactly as you say, you can't just do and update everything and then just cross your fingers that it works, because maybe it just won't. On the other hand, if you're pulling a framework, and that, I mean, if you have, I was doing a lot of projects with Angular. But the Angular Hello World, I think just the source code, not the build code, but the source code, the things you pull in and all of your dependencies, I think was over 100 megabytes, right? So these are 100 megabytes of dependencies you are kind of responsible for, but can't change it really, because that's what the framework demands. And this is a great challenge.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've run those numbers for conference talks before, and if you do like an ng new to create a new Angular app without writing one single line of code, you have 3 million lines of code as dependencies in that project. So
that's
I did that same for another talk, and I did it for a Java Spring Boot application, because that is the most hip and happening framework nowadays. That includes the whole web server, and that I wrote literally, I scaffolded it. I wrote 4 lines of code, which basically was a Hello World endpoint, and I think I had over 500,000 lines of codes in my in my application for all the stuff that is loaded into my class path. And that people say, yeah, but we're not using that. First of all, are you sure? And are you sure it cannot be loaded into memory to some extent? So that is the whole. It works. It perfectly works, but not always in the way you want it to work.
Yeah. And you can change it, right? I mean, I still remember 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was doing I started with PHP early on back then, because a market leader even then, but I also did a little bit of classic ASP, active server pages, right? So Microsoft's Windows only thing for web applications. And I'm proud to say, or no, I'm not ashamed to say, let's put it that way, that ASP was the last technology I completely knew and grasped, because it was 6 objects and 24 properties and methods. That's all. Plus, the language, VB script, which already sounds like can't do much, and that's the case. So that's the last technology where I said, okay, I know it inside out. I know everything about it, because it was so limited, in scope, in features, etc., etc. But nowadays, with a framework, even with the lighter ones than say Angular, still, I mean, you just know a fraction of it. And you can't really change much, right? You can't just say, oh no, I would like to pull out that dependency. You just can't. Right? It is a challenge, and it's it's a problem. But on the other hand, you gain, you probably save yourself some time in development because of everything that comes with those frameworks. But it comes at a cost.
Well, I think the most important thing is, like, let's not go into tooling too much yet, but just to know that you need to update every once in a while. That is already the thing. I mean, let's look at the good side of open source, and a lot of open source developers try to be on top of things. If something is disclosed responsibly, people will work on it, and people will already have newer versions out, and that is in many cases already there. So it means that if you have an application and it runs in production already, just don't leave it there and work on something new. Just every now and then, just like your car needs upgrades and needs maintenance, your home needs maintenance, your software needs maintenance as well. That works for your code, like what kind of encryption algorithm am I using, but also for the stuff that you inherit from dependencies, because people publish these things maybe even daily, and if you take that delta and you keep that delta small, it's kind of easy. Like if I wait for a year and try to work out the new Angular version 15 and I'm yet on version 4, I'm just saying something, then it's a hard thing. Then APIs changes all over the place. But if I go from 4.1 to 4.2, then it's not so much of a problem. So I think it's more of a mind shift. And I think that security, in many cases, we see a lot of technical stuff, but I think the most important stuff is the cultural stuff, that we need to be aware of these things. Maybe, or maybe you disagree, but I feel that is the challenge I have in a lot of cases.
I would agree. Another challenge I do see, though, is that the cadence of new releases is just so different from the old days. So, for instance, let's just look at the market leads, right? PHP, .NET, new major version every 12 months, and some of those don't have long-term support, but just have I don't know. So please don't blame me for this. A year of support, right? So you have to continue to update, and in addition, and that's I think where your cultural aspect fits in extremely well. If you as a development team have a new major version, you are inclined to say, oh, new major version, we can afford to change the API, right? Which makes these updates less trivial, right? But I think it's important to have a process. That's the most important thing. You have a process to frequently do those updates. You can't have an application and then let it lie there stale, and it just continues to work because it always worked. You may be able to do this with a long-term support version where you only get super minor updates, but yeah, these write once, run always, forever approach just doesn't cut it anymore, just due to the complexity, I guess, right? It must be the complexity. Those bare bones, no framework apps you write once and they have a mild complexity, those might be able to run forever.
I have a proposal. Now we are like really deep into the topic, and maybe some people who accidentally crushed in, they really don't know what we talk about. Let's make it a bit more demified. Like start with the pretty basics about security here. So we have like a technical security and security experts who are actually coding, and then we have like governance people who are like never coding, but they understand that they need to have routines in place and procedures. And they make sure that in the organization there is all this stuff is set up. So it depends also like on the maturity of your organization, what you have. But what we have to be aware of is that the attacks became more severe and more advanced and much more smart. As a user experience expert, I must say that the one thing that is biggest threat for security is actually human factor. Mm-hmm. It is the human factor. Right? So even though that we are like really good at coding, I hope, we are, but there is always some human factor, either by the person who codes or by just person in the organization who maybe didn't, lock the screen when he left his, desk, just that. Like my company is all the time updating some security systems. So first you had this 4 pin code on your mobile. Now I have to type many numbers there. We also used to have some length of password. Now we have like mega passphrase, and that's actually considered to be pretty good and hot today to use passphrase. Like basically, I don't know, the poem. You write your favorite poem, yeah. So maybe we could come up with some basic tips and tricks for people, like what could this smart small things are. And also remember, when you usually start working in serious companies, you also go through this all these different courses, like how to handle information, how not to let just random people in, look at their card, make sure the card is from your company. Actually, don't just assume that people are nice. It's many things. I mean, it's everywhere. It's a lot of industry espionage that's going on as well. So basically, let's talk about that. So maybe Philippe, you would like to add something there.
Well, I approach security from a development perspective, since I mostly work with developers. And what I actually wanted to say, based on the previous discussion as well, is we've been bashing dependencies, you have to keep them up to date and this and that. But on the other hand, what I see a lot is that because we rely on libraries that much, we often get libraries and dependencies and frameworks that do things secure by default. And that's a major step forward. For example, I work a lot with complex technologies like OAuth and OIDC, and I used to teach all of these details, you have to do this there and this there, and make sure you check this and that and that. And now it's use a library. This is a good one, this is a good one, this is a good one, and you're covered because the library does all of that for you. It handles all of the details, and that's absolutely awesome. Same thing with Angular, since Ryan mentioned Angular anyway. They have a 6-month release cycle, so I'm not sure if you can go from 4 to 15 in a year, but it's not that bad, fortunately. But Angular takes a holistic approach to security, and it's very opinionated, as in they do a lot of things for you, and if you agree, if that suits your use case, it's going to be absolutely awesome. It's very easy for me to teach Angular security because it's like, hey, Angular does this, you have to avoid these 3 things, and you're good. And that's absolutely good. Of course, the moment you have a use case that kind of goes against the grain of the framework, like it doesn't really fit what they want you to do, then it's going to be a nightmare. And you typically find that those people use other frameworks because it gives them more flexibility, which in turn requires more responsibility. So yeah, I would say secure by default should be, to come back to Daria's statement, I think secure by default should be present everywhere in every way of thinking. And that goes from physical security to how people behave, to help them behave more securely, and all of that. So yeah,
we organized internal courses on security, like those 8 days, like everything from like governance to cryptography, just so that our developers and other good people would be aware of all these different aspects of security, and just basically really coaching them on the topic intensely.
Yeah. Well, cryptography is a perfect example. You have this library called Lipsodium, which is
good example.
It's kind of the, I wouldn't say dummy, kind of the agnostic approach to cryptography, as in it doesn't allow you to configure what algorithm and all of that, because that's where mistakes are made. It just says like, hey, give us our keys and we give you a crypto box, and you have 2 operations, encrypt and decrypt. And you don't really have to care about initialization vectors and nonces and algorithms and padding and all of that, because honestly, nobody really wants to dig into that unless you're a cryptographer. And to me, that's absolutely awesome. And whenever I can, I tell customers, or I help them like, hey, we should do it like this, because this actually handles all of this for you and you don't have to worry about any of the details. And as long as the details are right, of course.
Yeah. Sorry for interrupting, but yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, as Darija absolutely correctly said, right? So the human factor is the problem, and sometimes when I talk about a security risk for a website, then sometimes I get the question, but this requires that some user is already logged in, or some user clicks on a link in an email. I say, and this is going to happen because you have all kinds of users, and I mean they don't need to know this. So from a development perspective, we have to take everything into account here and try to make applications as secure as possible, even if the victim cooperates with the attacker. And on the other hand, making writing or creating secure applications as easy as possible for a developer and as secure as possible is a crucial point. So I wholeheartedly agree with Philippe here. So for instance, I want to know in the PHP space, right? What they did a couple of years ago is they introduced a super simple extension. I think nowadays it's even, using Lipsodium in the backend for password hashing. So there's an extension, and it basically has two methods, right? Well, actually 4, but 2 of them are important: hash a password and validate a hash. And that's really as easy as storing your clear text passwords in the database. With one difference, it's much more secure, right? And so this is key. This is crucial. And I mean, and I think in last time I checked in .NET, creating the same hash is 7 lines of code. Still okay, but the name of the class contains RFC and then the number of the RFC, so it derived bytes, all technically correct, but you just hope that developers just copy from the correct Stack Overflow article when they implement this, because there's no just please hash my password. Yeah,
but
Brian,
but I also think that there you have that thing, like just copy pasting from articles, and there are a lot of good articles. Don't get me wrong on that, but we have to look at an article. If you look at a security article specifically, look at when was it written. Like if you look at articles from 2002, of course they might advocate for MD5. I'm just calling something up. So that's we have to evaluate this constantly, and I totally agree with Philippe that we need to use vetted libraries to do the heavy lifting for us, and we do that anyway. But we need to get them first. We need to get them up to date, but we also need to know what are we actually doing, because why should we do this? And I think the why is already a thing that a lot of developers are not conscious on it, because we are by default, we are not security experts, we are builders, and we build to. If I know my own program manager from back in the day, it was like, make sure that this function works in 3 days because we need to push this out earlier than my competitor. And there is that cultural aspect again. But why did I make this decision? Because Stack Overflow told me so, or not? And then, of course, with the libraries, I totally agree. For instance, don't ever write your own encryption, unless you are a super cryptographer person. Then you can do that, but then you should publish that as well as a library. I believe if you can do that and make the new unbreakable encryption, then you should publish that as a library and serve the community. But in many cases,
and get it vetted. Even more importantly, get it vetted. Yeah.
But they can call us and we will vet it for them. If it's good. But I think the point is that everybody together needs to be aware of it. If I'm not secure, like secure development, but also having my passwords up to date on my own system, don't link my Git token, whatever. How can I be like the software that I create reflects how I'm working? Because what is the weakest link? Me. And people just don't attack my application anymore. They just attack me, and then they have my notebook with my Git token because I just unprotected have it on my desktop, and they just. So the more of the problem is we need to find out where the weakest link is and fix that. And I think it starts with a lot of awareness that it's not the security team that is there in the company that takes care of the security, but it's a shared effort between everyone.
Yeah, and that Stack Overflow thing is actually pretty interesting, because in the Angular world there's another. They had that problem as well. So in Angular 1, they had a function which would allow you to bypass built-in security mechanisms. And the function was called trust as HTML. It basically marked a piece of HTML as safe. And people mistook that as a security function, while it was actually the bypass security function. So it sidestepped security. And you would find Stack Overflow posts say like, yeah, just call this and it will work as you expect in a very insecure way. But that was not what was mentioned in the Stack Overflow post. So in Angular 2, they said like, yeah, this is not very good. So they renamed that function to a function called bypass security trust HTML to avoid problems like people auto-completing things in their IDE, like, oh yeah, this is probably what I need. And now it says bypass security. And I honestly believe that developers, like you said, they want to push out functions as fast as they can without going through pages and pages of documentation to see like, is this actually what I think it is? And if it says like bypass security, this will trigger a bell. Even with somebody with only 3 days to push out the function, they will be like, wait a minute, why does it say bypass security? And you will actually go look at that. And the first thing the docs say is like, yeah, this is not secure. You should do it like this or that to make sure you got it right. And that pattern is so interesting because you see that come back in other libraries where they have a function. I think I just saw a vulnerability like last week of somebody calling the wrong function to get claims out of a JSON web token. And they should have used another one, but the one they used didn't say this is insecure. So yeah, it's an honest mistake and very easy to make. So those simple patterns like calling something insecure or bypass security or dangerous or something is so easy to give people more awareness, and that's something we should apply in much more places as well.
Sorry, Brian, you first. Sorry.
Yeah, but I want to go broader than that. It's yes, absolutely, 100%, absolutely true. But I also think we have this. If you run into a company, you have these mandatory security trainings that you have to do. But I was in a company once, and I find this very, very interesting that what they did. It was one of the major banks here in the Netherlands. And they randomly, every once in a while, they just send people an email and say, "Hey, your token for your Wi-Fi connection is broken. You need to relocate it here. Click here with the appropriate logos, but with a malicious email address. You will get redirected to a website like the old school phishing mail, because people think that because we are tech savvy, we don't get it. We will see that." And it was interesting to see that at least 25% of the developers, like core developers, did blindly click on that. And that is mind-boggling for me, that we think we are secure, or we think that will not happen to us because we are tech savvy, and that is so much not true. So all the advice we know, we surely have to look at ourselves. Do I actually apply that to my system? Do I not reuse passwords? Am I using a manager for, well, and these are the basic things, because if somebody else does that who is not tech savvy, developers are more or less like, why did that person do that? You know that is phishing. But again, if you craft it in the right way, and you make it in such a way that it's likely, developers still do that. And these type of awareness things, I find interesting that a lot of developers were scared, like, oh wow, did that happen to me? I was never aware of that. I was always under an impression that will not happen to me. And that's the start, because that's now the weakest link. But just as much as for instance, what do I do with my local machine? My local machine is my everything. It has everything on it, my code, my the stuff that I can push directly to production. But what if somebody has my machine? What happens there? Like, all these company policies are not there to scare you off. And I felt that, like, oh, I need to do this and that. Oh, it's so much work. But once people explained to me, like, okay, now I have your laptop. Let's see what I can do with it. No, you don't touch it. Let's see what and then I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're actually right. So the awareness there is just as much important as the code we write.
And it's much more important now with a lot of people working from home and maybe not having, proper home office and, big company where, the machine is locked up anyway. Plus, we as developers often have machines that are not as locked up as, in other areas of a company, just because we need whatever specific privileges, right? But, at home, if your machine is at home and you have whatever children, are they allowed to watch a YouTube video at night or something like that? Have they access to the machine? Are they then maybe, downloading something?
But I also believe it's much of the policies of bigger companies should be based on the current situation. Like reformatting my password every 3 months or every month doesn't make any sense. Just make sure that you have some sort of multi-factor authentication in there, and there are a lot of systems that can help you with that, and then you're already done. Like these kind of things that default by secure or secure by default that Philip was talking about for the application development. This should also work for basically everything we do in life, because it will reflect in the end our stuff that we create.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's if there is a shortcut, people will use the shortcut, and that's why people don't read error messages. Do you really want to? It's not. I don't read the message. I just check which of those two buttons has yes or next or ignore on it. For developers, actually, we can make them or us, feel the pain by making something wrong. So Philippe's example was great. So I think that's really where we can attack it. So in content security policy, which is an HTTP header that basically tells the browser which content to execute, which is great to as a defense mechanism against some attacks. You can enable things that hypothetically allow attacks. So, for instance, inline code, without going into details. But the command to allow inline code is not called enable inline or something like I would have called it. It's called unsafe inline. So you have to type unsafe in order to activate that feature. So you feel the pain. You hopefully feel that you're making something really, really bad now. And I think for developers that can work. For users, yes, education is key. I really completely agree. But it's hard. It's like, spam emails. Depending on which study you take, I think if there's a spam email and there's a link on it, about, I think, once every 300 to 1,000 spam emails, someone clicks that link. So you just, have to send enough emails. So you always find someone who will click that link, who will not read the error message, who will not check the domain name shown in the browser, right?
Or SMS. Now I receive SMSs from very strange, companies sounding like Post or something that's common known. But education is important, and it's also depends on maturity of the organization. Of course, that organization needs to bring this up. And what users are simple, you have to first educate them, and then you have to remind them about it all the time. Basically have this culture of, reminding. But if you don't have in your organization as a developer, maybe you don't have that, maturity, then it's actually your responsibility, because the person who will sit with the problem will be actually you responsible for some security, problem. So be aware of this. Find things yourself online. There are like many cheap or almost free courses on Udemy or like anywhere about security. Just like start getting a bit interested in that topic if you're not there at all. Just start understanding what it means. Security for children. My colleague working for military published a book about how you should basically do this with the children, because they are on these gadgets all the time, and you can kill a person with a clock or like a dog bracelet. There is technologies to hack this, and there is even a website like how you can like search for all these things, Internet of Things around you where you are. It's many things that can happen. So start early, right?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
And I have to go, guys. I really have to go. I have a
good seeing you. Good seeing you.
Yes.
Hopefully next time in person. Thanks for being part of that
panel. Thank you a lot, and have fun.
Thank you. Bye. Actually, there's a question which is directed at Brian, but I think everyone is of course free to chime in. So the idea is you check source code for vulnerabilities during check-in, right? Or continuous integration and continuous delivery. And then later a vulnerability is found. So you have a dependency, right? And then the vulnerability isn't there when it was validated, but it's just found out later. So what's the best process to anticipate that or react upon that? I think we all have our ideas, but since Brian is specifically mentioned in the question, if you don't mind.
I'm very interested how Philippe thinks about it, because I might be way straightforward in this, and the thing is, in many cases, automation and regular repetition. Even if something is in production, at that point that you pushed it in production, like the moment you push it in production, it gets static, as in that is the binary you publish. And then I'm not only talking about dependency, but also your code. So still, you can have a snapshot of that and scan it on a daily basis or whatever, like whatever you're comfortable with. But this depends so much on your context, and get actively pinged or chimed in when something happens. Like if something finds out, like these tools you are using might evolve as well. And if you're scanning on, for instance, if you look at the CVE database, something comes in tomorrow and I publish it today and I scan it on a daily basis, then tomorrow in the cycle, it will see like, hey, you're using this weird library and it found the vulnerability. It pings me. And hopefully I can connect it right away to my Jira board and give it a high priority so it pops up. But that depends on your situation. The common factor here is get the tools that help you and scan regularly. Because once you are to production, a lot of people think like, if it's your code, if it's your dependency thing, like we're done. Let's focus on the new feature because that's my KPI for next month. And I get that. So why not just, instead of doing that manually, get a tool in place that scans that daily, and when something comes up, but also the other way around. Like if something comes up like, hey, we found a new fix, because you might be comfortable with a certain vulnerability as it is not affecting you, and that is only something you can choose consciously if you know what the context is. But scanning regularly, that is my go-to answer for here.
I would agree here. So I think automated tooling and testing helps a lot. But of course, especially if you have a maintainable number of dependencies, so not 100, but maybe a couple of, just define a process and stick to it that you follow up for new updates and then check whether there are security issues in there. And
pick a tool that you actually like. As in, what you see now, but it's something funny, because what we see is like we have this company CI farm that has like 10 tools, and what I'm doing is like I'm publishing it and making sure that all tests are green. That doesn't help. That I'm just satisfying the system. But if I have a tool that helps me, or that I think like that is active, so I would say from a company perspective, from an architect perspective, like choose with your developers what kind of tooling you want to use company-wide. Because if there's no adoption, then it doesn't work. Then you're just satisfying a tool. Like, okay, everything is green. What we did like a few years ago was, it was a QA tool that we used. And we're like, and they were flagging things that would just put ignore in front of the code, and then it ignored this. So we could freely publish to production, but that is what you said. If there is a shortcut, people will use it. But if it is a tool that makes sense, and they have, as a developer, you have saying in things like this matters, then you have adoption, and then you can grow that whole security mindset.
All right, Philippe, do you want to add anything as well?
There's a lot I can add, but let me first agree with what Brian said. Like, you need some automation, otherwise this is going to be really difficult. Something else I could add is continuous training. So something that actually happened the past few months is I've been teaching a couple of Angular security workshops, and I taught the same workshop twice, one in March and one in May. And during both workshops, people actually went to their code after I explained, like, these things is something you shouldn't do. They went to their code and like, oh crap. And they actually found live vulnerabilities in their production applications just because they didn't know about that. And somebody explained, like me, I explained the problem, like, this is how it manifests itself in code. They looked at it like, oh, damn, we actually have exactly that problem. So yeah, keep learning and have some way to audit your code. Some things that really help there are linting tools are very easy to add rules to. You have like very simple static analysis tools. One of the most up-and-coming things today is SemGrab, I think. It's very, very, very easy to add patterns there. It's not a super advanced tool, but it's going to be very simple to find straightforward things in your code, like common vulnerabilities, things you learn about or things you read about. Like, just add a rule. Maybe the rule already exists, you can add it, and at that moment you get immediate feedback. And of course you can go towards advanced code scanning tools, but these are typically not deploy and you're up and running. These are like, you run it once and it's like, holy crap, we have 500,000 reports, of which maybe 400,000 are false positives or need to be configured for your specific organization. And that's a whole different game. And you need a security team behind that to actually help you set that up and configure that properly for your specific situation and mark how you do things securely, so the tool actually detects that, and so on and so on. And that's that's something you actually have to plan for, and not something you just install today and are up and running with that tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Just some examples. If you have like a variable called password, some of the tools with a comment, some of the tools start tripping like, oh my god, you have a password in your code. It's like, there's no value in there. There's no secret. I mean, yeah, things like that annoy me really hard.
There's no silver bullet where you push a button and then you get only the valid results and not more.
But
it depends where you are in the sales process. In pre-sales, there's going to be that button.
I love the
good one.
I love the continuous training. I think that is the key. So you can you can also, like, the tool is just something that helps you. But if you don't know what you're looking for, that continuous training is absolutely 100 points.
Absolutely. I mean, there are companies, and I think it will be similar for you, right? That which I visit like once a year, right? And more or less doing the same every time, always updated, of course, because they want to continuously create this awareness. And awareness it's not something you can learn by reading a book or something. It's something you have to talk to someone and then see what can go wrong. And
if you're reading a book, you're already aware about it.
Exactly.
People often ask me like, how is security in companies? I'm like, I'm very biased, because by the time they get to me for training, they know they have to spend money on training for security. And I don't see the companies that are like, security, whatever. Nothing ever happens to us. I don't see them, and I don't interact with them typically. So I do all kinds of trainings, and sometimes they need awareness and want to start with some basic security awareness training, some vulnerabilities, which is good. And then the year after, we do a more advanced course or specialized on a specific topic and stuff like that. So yeah, absolutely. It's and I can guarantee every time, even when advanced or senior people are in the room that have had security training before, they're always going to learn something new.
There's always something new. Exactly. Same
Precisely.
here.
So yeah,
Excellent.
Pretty exciting.
I think that's a great way to end this panel. Great fun. Thanks to everyone involved. Thanks to all of the attendees. Thanks for the great question. Stay healthy. Hope to see you all again soon, preferably in person. And enjoy
awesome.
the final conference day. So thanks, everyone, and
Bye-bye.
have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.